the spiritual elements and all of the emotional elements that we need to do with what spiritually got us here, what psychologically got us here. But we also know that in this moment, we need, just like you would need if you were in a car accident, get me the best doctor around here. And when you're talking about the external remedies, when you're talking about the healing on an external level, you're talking about the politicians. And I thought we need the best doctor around, and you know who I call? Leadership is an amazing thing. I think of a great leader. I think of a great leader as someone who paves the highway. You're driving in your car, you decide whether to get on or whether to get off. But we have someone who has paved a great highway here. Paved a great highway here in the United States. And I find myself, it's really interesting for me to say this because I know during the presidential primaries and all that went on, I remember towards the end of the primary, I remember somebody saying, "Marianne, what do you think about this or that?" And I remember some words came out of my mouth that kind of surprised me at the time. They didn't surprise me on a political level, but just to hear myself saying them, I said, I don't know what I think. I want to hear what Bernie says first. And now, more than ever, I think to myself sometimes, oh God, I just want to hear what Bernie has to say. And so I called all of you together here tonight, because I know you feel what I feel. We just want to hear what Bernie has to say.
Thank you.
Marry me, Bernie!
Thank you very much. Let me begin by thanking
2020! Please.
Let me begin by thanking Marianne and all of you for the work that you are doing now and have done for so many years. Let me begin by telling a little story. When we were thinking about running for president, we went around the country and just try to do what people do. Is there support? Is there going to be the kind of energy that we need to run a serious campaign? And we were invited by Marianne to go to LA to speak to a Sister Giant event similar to this in LA. And the enthusiasm there was so great that it was certainly one of the factors that determined our running for president. So I want to thank all of you. As Marianne mentioned, we are in a very, very unusual moment in American history and in world history. And let me just say a few things. Number one, if you think that you don't have the answers, trust me, you are not alone. But what is imperative, as never before, is that we really think this thing through, because the stakes are so extraordinary for this country and for the world. And on behalf of my 7 grandchildren and the children all over this planet, we cannot fail. So the first point that I make is I know that some of your friends say, wow, this sucks. Whoa, I kind of given it up and I'm going to go into, my own life and ignore what goes about, turn off the news, not read the papers, and kind of sink slowly into despair. And to those people who say this, what I say as loudly as I can, not only for your lives, but for the lives of future generations, despair is not an option. And what I would also say is, on every important issue facing this country, the views of Donald Trump and his friends are a minority position, and don't ever forget that. And if there is one thing that I learned in my campaign, and I learned many things, is that we have a generation today of young people who are extraordinary. This is a generation that wants real change. It is a generation that is the least discriminatory generation in the history of our country. It is a generation that is prepared to think big and ask why not more than any other generation in history. And I will never forget, as long as I live, being in rural areas in California, speaking to thousands of people, working people, young people, black and white and Latino, Native Americans, Asian Americans, people who look to the future of this country with enormous optimism, with, as Marianne said, we will not forget, with love, with compassion, who know all of the wonderful things that we can do as a nation. So now is not the time for despair. Now is the time to be smart. Now is, most importantly, the time to bring the American people together around an agenda of compassion, of love, of progressive politics, and to take on the hatred and the bigotry which we see in the White House today. Now let me suggest to you, and some will disagree with me, and that's okay too, but let me suggest to you that what happened on November 8th, Trump's victory, was not a victory for Trump or his ideology. It was a gross political failure of the Democratic Party. Let me also tell you something again, where some people may disagree with me, but if you think that everybody who voted for Donald Trump is a racist or a sexist or a homophobe, you would be dead wrong. Many of those folks, and I met them all over this country, are hardworking, decent people, but they are asking questions like, how does it happen I am working longer hours for lower wages? How does it happen that almost all of the new income and wealth in this country is going to the top 1%? How does it happen that as a single mother, I cannot afford childcare for my baby? How does it happen that my kids will in all likelihood have a lower standard of living than I will, and they're leaving school deeply in debt? How does it happen that I'm working for $9 an hour and nobody gives a damn about whether or not I could put food on the table or pay my rent? How does it happen that the crooks on Wall Street destroy the economy, yet kids who smoke marijuana get prosecuted? But the CEOs on Wall Street who destroy the lives of millions of people, not one prosecution of a Wall Street executive. How does that happen? And Trump comes along, and Trump is, among many other qualities, a pathological liar. Somebody who frankly has no ideology at all.
That's right.
Tomorrow he may come out for a single payer health care for all program. I don't know. He doesn't believe anything. It's just what sounds right at the moment. By the end of the day, he will change that point of view. But the point that I want to make about Trump and what he did, if you listen carefully to what he said, I, Donald Trump, I'm going to take on the establishment. Now, you and I know that that was a lie. You don't take on the establishment by appointing billionaire after billionaire to your cabinet. You don't take on the establishment by lying to the American people when during your campaign you said that you would not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, but the day after the election, you forgot to send out the tweet that said you would keep that promise. And you appoint, just today, this is my committee that dealt with it, we appointed a gentleman to become head of the OMB, the budget director, who is on record over and over again as strongly in favor of cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. All right, but this should not be a surprise to anybody in the room. But this is what I do want to say. There are people in this country who are hurting, and they are hurting terribly. And for years they looked to the Democratic Party, which one time was the party of working people, and they looked and they looked and they looked, and they got nothing in return. And out of desperation, they turned to Mr. Trump. So our job politically, Marianne said a lot. It is more than politics. It is spiritual. It is psychological. We've got to deal with those issues. I agree with her. Absolutely. This is a holistic problem that we've got to address. But politically, simply and straightforwardly, we have got to create a Democratic Party which stands with working people and the poor, not with Wall Street and the wealthy. And right now we're in the middle of that fight, taking on the Democratic establishment. Some of you may know I'm supporting Keith Ellison to become the next chair of the DNC. And he's running into tremendous opposition. But what I want to see is a Democratic Party not which spends all of its time raising money from the wealthy and the powerful, but a Democratic Party that opens its doors to working people, to low-income people, to young people, that creates a Democratic Party with a small d, that mobilizes millions of people to demand that we have a government representing all of us, not just the 1%. And before I get into some of the issues that I think we have got to fight for politically, let me talk about, again, holistic efforts and some of the progress that we have made. Marianne mentioned medicine. She's right. I used to be the chair of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. And many of you will be surprised to know that in VA hospitals all over this country, in DOD, Department of Defense medical facilities, acupuncture is used, yoga is used, meditation is used. And right now there is a massive effort to lower the amount of drugs that many of our men and women in the military have gotten, and to get them into programs which will ease pain without medication. That's what we are beginning to do. I think that this moment in history, when we look at it, should be looked at in the way that we look back on the anti-war movement with regard to Vietnam. It should be looked upon as a moment similar to the civil rights movement, when blacks and whites came together and said, we will not accept racism and segregation in America. It should be looked upon as a moment similar to the growth of the women's movement, where women and their male allies said loudly and clearly, women will not be second-class citizens in the United States. It should be looked upon as a moment similar to the struggles of our brothers and sisters in the gay community, who said loudly and clearly that in America, people will have the right to love and marry whoever they want, regardless of gender. And all of those struggles and the environmental struggles were never led or won by people in Washington, D.C. In every instance, in every great moment in American history, the way change came about was from the bottom on up, never the top on down. And that is where we are right now at this moment. And if there is a silver lining in Trump's victory, it is now the opportunity, and we saw it several weeks ago with that extraordinary, spontaneous women's march here in Washington. And all across the country. Unbelievable. In every rally, in every march all over the country, there were far more people showing up than the organizers had dreamed possible. In my small state of Vermont, for the first time that I have ever seen in my life, they literally had to almost shut down the interstate because so many people headed to Montpelier, Vermont. So what is the broad political program that we have got to undertake? First of all, it is energizing people all over this country to understand, if they didn't know it yesterday, they've got to know it today, that politics is vitally important, and you cannot look at politics as a spectator. You have got to be an activist. Number two, and it is much easier said than done, we have got to bring diverse elements of the progressive movement together.
Yeah.
And I can fully assure you that Trump and his friends will be doing everything possible to make that difficult. But our job is to make certain that women struggling for a woman's right to choose, struggling to make sure that we do not defund Planned Parenthood, are standing shoulder to shoulder with American workers who need jobs, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. We need environmentalists who understand that if we are not bold and decisive in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, the future of this planet is in doubt. But we at the same time have got to stand with those coal miners and their families who may lose their job, and make sure that we work to economically develop the areas in which they live. They cannot be satisfied. So it is a question of bringing people together. But at the end of the day, and this I am 100% sure of, on issue after issue, the vast majority of the American people have agreement. Let me just give you some of them. You go out and you ask the American people, should we raise the minimum wage in this country to a living wage?
Hell yes.
Well, it's not just you who believe it. It is the overwhelming majority of Americans, progressives, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans. My view is we fight for a $15 an hour minimum wage. You ask the American people whether it is acceptable in the year 2017 that women doing the same work as men earn 79 cents on the dollar, and the American people say that's wrong, we need pay equity. You ask the American people, not just progressives, whether it is appropriate that billionaires like Donald Trump not pay 1 nickel in federal taxes, and whether or not we should demand that the rich start paying their fair share of taxes. The American people say yes. You ask the American people whether or not we should have trade policies that are based on fair trade, not unfettered free trade. That corporations cannot with impunity just throw workers out on the street and exploit poor people all over the world. And the American people say, we need a new trade policy. You ask the American people whether they think a half a dozen Wall Street banks should have assets of enormous consequence, such that 2/3 of the credit cards issued in this country come from 6 financial institutions. And you know what the American people will tell you? Break them up. Bring back Glass-Steagall legislation. You ask the American people whether it is acceptable in a highly competitive global economy that millions of our people are leaving school deeply in debt, and many others who are qualified cannot afford to get a college education, and the American people will tell you, let us make public colleges and universities tuition free. And while Trump and his friends bring forth an ugly, unconstitutional executive order banning people from 7 countries from coming into the United States, what the American people will tell you is that we need comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. So my point here is, do not forget for 1 second, number one, Trump lost the popular vote by almost 3 million votes. Number two, on virtually every major issue, Trump's position is a minority position. And what that tells me, what our job is to bring the majority together. To bring the majority together in all kinds of ways to make sure that the Congress starts listening to the American people and not Trump's billionaire friends. Let me just tell you a little bit about some of the places that I visited running for president. One of the great pleasures and honors was going to 46 states all over this country. I will never forget visiting an area in West Virginia called McDowell County in southern West Virginia. And you know what's going on there? And I'm going back there in a couple of weeks with MSNBC to do a town meeting.
Thank you.
Because I think it is high time that the media started focusing on the lives of the American people, not just on political gossip. In McDowell County and areas all over West Virginia, Kentucky, and many other parts of our country, the despair is so great that we are seeing for the first time in the modern history of America, people living shorter lives than their parents. Life expectancy is actually going down because people are dying of drug addiction, of alcohol-related diseases, and of suicide. That is how significant and deep the despair is. Not just in West Virginia, but in many parts of this country. I was in the Pine Ridge, visited the Pine Ridge Native American Reservation.
Thank you, Bernie.
Where the life expectancy there is equivalent to a poor third world country like Guatemala, where unemployment is rampant, youth suicide tragically high, and educational opportunities virtually non-existent. I was in New York City, visiting the high-rise projects there. $17 billion in needed maintenance. $17 billion for public housing in New York City. Elderly people living on the 12th floor can't get down because the elevator is broken and they're worried about gang violence. I was in Baltimore, Maryland, where there is a heroin epidemic and very few opportunities for people to get the treatment that they need. All over this country, there are people who are hurting. And our job is to communicate and talk to those people and stand up and fight with those people for a government that listens to them and not just people who want huge tax breaks. So the goal, and I say this to each and every one of you, it is always easy to come to beautiful conferences like this, where we look to our friends over here and our friends over there, we're all in basic agreement. It is a hell of a lot harder to start talking to people who have a worldview very different than yours. But that is exactly what we have to do. It is also imperative that we dig into politics right now in a way that we have never done before, and it is beginning to happen. I am seeing it in California. Progressives have stood up, gone to local assembly district meetings, and progressives are making real progress in taking over the Democratic Party in California. Just last week in the state of Washington, progressives elected progressive leadership in the Democratic Party in Washington State, in Nebraska. So there are good things that are happening, but we have just got to continue the effort. So let me conclude by saying I don't have any magical formulas anymore. I appreciate Marianne considering me the physician here. But good physicians know their limitations. But the ideas are going to come from you and from everybody else. But I leave with this very firm belief. Number one, all over this country, there are people who are profoundly disgusted and embarrassed by the actions and the words coming from the Trump administration. Number two, our job is to be incredibly smart and to bring our people together, to tolerate people who may have different ideas, but who understand that what a Trump is about, and this is one of the things that scares me most, for a demagogue to succeed, they need to cultivate hatred. Now, the hatred may be against immigrants. We're all supposed to hate immigrants, so maybe it's other minorities, African Americans, Latinos, or whatever. But I also worry that that hatred will spill over to foreign affairs, and that we are maybe entering into a situation where a Trump needs a war, and a war to rally public support. So this is tough stuff. This is really tough stuff. But I end the way I began optimistic about the future of this country because I know the decency of the American people, and I understand and believe that our job is to engage our brothers and sisters in the political process, to tell people who don't have confidence to run for office. Now you can tell them Bernie Sanders said that. I'm a member of the Senate. And you should see some of the senators there. So if you have any doubts about your ability to run for office, turn on C-SPAN. You can do it. But that means, and this is vitally important, this is what the Koch brothers have done. It means running for school board, running for city council, running for state legislature. We can win those seats, and we're already seeing victories all over this country. So the message is, do not despair. Keep your heads held high. The views that you hold are the views of a majority of the American people. And when we stand together, fight together, we are going to win this thing. Thank you all.